heading back upstream, we're going the same direction as migrating salmon. If you take a look on your monitors, we'll show you how one of these fish reels actually operates to catch enough salmon for the families to sustain themselves through the winter months. No external motor or engine is required to make the fish reel run. It's run entirely by the current of the river. You can see it there, swooping up a salmon in its catch basket. The salmon will fall down because of gravity, and then slide down the vertical chute, pop out on the other side to the catch box where it will wait until the family comes by in their boat, and then for further processing. And if you have 3 generations of a family living together, 100 dogs to feed, each dog eats 1 salmon a day, you can imagine how much salmon you would need to harvest. And someone that knows a lot about this process is actually standing on shore to the left of us. Dorinda, Leo.
Dorinda. Hello everyone, my name is Leo, or my native name is Dotsa, and Dotsa means raven. I'm Nipak and Quake and Athabascan, and I grew up in the village of Tanana, which is located where the Yukon and Tanana rivers come together, which in my native language we call Nuchalawoya. But I spent most of my childhood all up and down those rivers collecting my family's subsistence foods. However, right now I'm a senior at a local university where I study English.
Well, you know a lot about this process of preparing salmon to be able to feed yourselves and also your dog teams through the winter time. And we'd like to learn more about how you cut and prepare the fish. But before we get into it, would you mind sharing with us what these different structures are here on shore?
Of course. So first off though, the fish camp that you all see right here looks just like the ones that my family would see all up and down the Yukon and Tanana rivers during the summer months. And that's because every summer, families pack up and then head up to 30 miles away from their village to their family's fish camp. Now, for example, my family has our fish camp just upriver from our village of Tanana, and we use set nets to catch our salmon. However, the centerpiece of many Athabascan fish camps is the fish reel that you all see right here. Now, the fish reel is an efficient fish cutting machine that allows families to catch enough salmon for not just themselves, but also their dog teams through the winter months. And now if you look up on shore, you can see the canvas wall tents, which is what many of us stay in during the summertime. Closer to me, we see the outdoor air drying rack, which is just where we hang the salmon until it can go into the smokehouse, which is this large, permanent structure behind me. Now that the smokehouse is the absolute key to turning the salmon into a lightweight, fully dehydrated, and preserved food source. But once fully dry, we do need to store it, so I'll put it up in that cache, which is that small structure on stilts. Now, we keep the cache on stilts to keep the food off the ground and away from any little pesky animals. But speaking of animals, if we look back over between those canvas wall tents, we can see those wooden crates. Now, those are actually dog houses because every summer we take our dogs with us to fish camp. This way they can act as a natural alarm system over the camp for any larger pesky animals.
Right, like if a bear were to come by, be trouble for the family and also weeks of work. But speaking of work there, Leo, what did you say was on your cutting table again?
So right here I have a chum salmon. Now here in interior Alaska, we get 3 different types of salmon. We get 1 run each of king salmon and silver salmon, and then we get 2 runs of chum. Now, because chum salmon are most often regarded as a lesser quality salmon, and because we get 2 runs of them, this is typically the one that we set aside for dog food. So right here, I prepared the most basic dog food cut. I began by cutting this head off from the body, and then I've separated these 2 fillets from the backbone. Of course, leaving it connected at the tail so I can still hang it up later. And there's still some meat on the backbone here. So at my fish camp, this goes right to the dogs as a little summer snack. And since this is a chum head, it'll go to the dogs as well. But if it was a king or silver head, it would be made into an absolute delicacy called fish head soup, which we always save for just our elders.
Fish head soup. Leo, what does fish head soup taste like?
I don't know, Noah. I'm not old enough.
We'll have to come back in 40 years and ask you again. But you know, fish head soup is actually really good for you. You know, there was some wisdom behind saving it for the elders. It has a tremendous amount of collagen in it. Now, Leo, what are you doing now with these slits you're making into the fillet?
So right now, I'm just scoring the salmon. So I'm just creating diagonal cuts through the flesh down to the skin. This will create more surface area throughout the fillet, which is going to allow the smoke to work deeper inside, and it'll further dehydrate it.
You can see once she's done making these cuts into the sides of the fillet, that all those cuts will open up like vents. It's actually a very great photo. But you know, fish camp wasn't just a time to work. It was also a time to come together as a family, learn the language, learn the traditions, learn the culture, spend time with your elders. And still to this day, it's an incredible time to come together. Nicely well done, Leo, once again. Are you going to take that fish and put it right into the smokehouse now, or are you going to leave it out to dry?
So we never want to put a wet or drippy salmon directly inside the smokehouse, just because then it might mold. So instead, I want to hang this outside on the outdoor air drying rack just until it forms a nice sheen or glaze. So once that first layer of moisture is gone, which on a more humid day like today might take an hour or so, but then it's ready to go into the smokehouse. At that point though, we really have to keep in mind that every family has their own techniques and preferences for smoking salmon. All of this here though is dog food, so it will be rotating in the smokehouse for 2 or even 3 weeks. And by that point, the salmon will become fully dehydrated, it'll weigh less than a pound, and it'll look something like this one.
Well, that's perfectly dehydrated. It actually looks a lot like rawhide. I imagine the dogs would really love it, but what would you do differently for people?
So for ourselves, the process is similar, but there are some big differences. Now, we do typically start off with those higher quality salmon, like the king or the silver, and then we'll put a bit more time and care into the process. Usually, we'll begin by washing them really well. And as much as we love cutting our salmon into these yummy fillets, we'll often instead cut them down into these much more thin, vertical pieces called salmon strips. Either way, everything then goes into a brine. Now, my family likes to use brown sugar, honey, and salt. And the salt is key because it'll help keep bugs off when the salmon's hanging outside. But once it's done on the drying rack, it then goes into the smokehouse, but for a much shorter time period than dog food. Usually we like just 2 days, because at that point, the salmon is going to have a much softer texture. And the final difference is, of course, the wood that we use, because for ourselves, we like cottonwood or alderwood, which will give the salmon a sweet, smoky flavor. But for the dogs, we can use just about anything. Spruce wood, driftwood, they're not picky at all.
No, dogs will usually eat anything. But you know, Leo, we're going to hold on to that good recipe of yours of that sweet brine and that sweet alderwood smoke. That sounds delicious. But as we make our way over to the mooring area here, would you mind sharing with our guests what this village experience is a little bit more about?
Of course. All of your guides and I are very excited to